Alright, so to finish our week on internationalisation, we're going to look at the risks that are associated with expansion across national borders. And there are two in particular that we're going to look at here, the political and the economic risks, which are probably the two primary concerns for any firm expanding overseas. If we consider first the political risks, often you find that there are global military engagements, such as that which occurred in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and Libya. These key conflicts, which can obviously present significant risks and threats to your expansion overseas. You don't particularly want to be getting caught up in these wars overseas. There's also the unknown outcomes of things like the Arab Spring, protectionist political trends as the economic downturn worsens. So the worse the economic climate, and we often find the political climate becomes quite protective towards the host country firms, and it makes it more difficult for you to expand into those markets. The potential nationalisation of invested assets, political instability of places like the Middle East is clearly a significant one. You don't want to be going overseas into a place where there is unknown or there is the unknown basically with regards to who is going to be in control of that particular nation and what that means for you as a firm. And also things like the Northeast Asia, the security instability. You only have to look at the conflict between North and South Korea to be quite concerned as a firm if you're looking to move into that region. There's also the economic risks, the things like the debt of various countries where you might get caught up in that if you expand into that particular market. The challenges for China, for example, in implementing the World Trade Organization agreements, that China's not alone there. There are many countries who fail to meet certain international standards. Uncertain prices for critical commodities. There are some nations in which prices for key inputs will fluctuate wildly, and that's not great for you as a firm. The successes and failures of privatisation and firm restructuring amongst, for example, the Eastern European countries. Increased trend of counterfeit products. We're seeing that a lot throughout Southeast Asia. Anybody who's been to Bali or Thailand will probably bought a counterfeit product. And the lack of global policing of these counterfeit products is becoming a significant issue for many firms, as is the failure of countries to pay debt obligations and the devaluation of their currencies during this global financial crisis. All key issues that present significant risks if you are looking to expand overseas. There are also more broad challenges to do with international strategies. First of all, the geographic dispersion increases the costs of coordination. So if you are looking to pursue a global strategy that we touched on in one of the previous videos from this week, then the coordination costs become a significant consideration. Obviously, the whole point of a global strategy is to maintain and reduce those costs, especially per unit, through things like economies of scale. But the further and further abroad you go, the wider your reach as an international company, the higher those coordination costs are going to be. Even if you're not pursuing a global strategy, if you have operations in many, many countries, it's going to be more expensive to coordinate all those activities than if you just operate in one or two of those countries. Trade barriers that we touched on before, like tariffs and import quotas, logistical costs, cultural diversity, not just in terms of language, but also the cultural values and customs, and other differences from one country to another will complicate the implementation of an international diversification strategy, especially as we touched on previously, if you're looking to go into a foreign market through such thing as an acquisition or a strategic alliance. That becomes quite complicated, dealing in particular with those cultural differences. And we've got a couple of videos that I've put up onto the Moodle site here, of YouTube clips that will clearly give you a good understanding of some of those cultural differences and how that can be tricky in terms of doing business in foreign markets. What we tend to see is that even the reduction of certain trade barriers through the establishment of such things as FTAs, as we talked about previously, will not necessarily guarantee the viability of an international strategy. And clearly the Australian car industry is a great example of this. The government worked to try and make that particular industry as competitive as possible by developing things like free trade agreements with foreign markets, as well as also propping up the local manufacturers, but it just could not work. So those foreign firms, the American firms like General Motors and Ford, have recently announced that they are no longer producing cars here because that international expansion strategy simply was not viable. What we do see is that the resource and risk sharing through inter-organisational networks, that is through things like strategic alliances, is one way that firms can build that flexibility. But certainly there are many challenges and risks that you do need to consider as a firm that is looking to internationalise.